Welcome, and thank you everyone for joining us for the third session of our virtual series for 2026, Resilient Futures, Sustainability in Shifting Times. I'm Jason Card, Vice President of External Affairs for the Chamber of Marine Commerce. The Chamber of Marine Commerce is proud to advance meaningful research, advocacy, and awareness activities on behalf of our members. As part of that, our virtual speaker series has become a highly valued means for sharing information and ideas with our membership. This year, we have taken the approach of presenting one session per quarter on a topic of importance to our membership. At the start of the year, we undertook an economic outlook for 2026 with Douglas Porter, Chief Economist with BMO, to help us understand where interest rates, commodities, and the economy in general were likely to head over the course of the year. We followed this in the second quarter with an exploration of the anticipated workforce needs of the marine sector and what is being done to address those needs. Today, with Green Marine's 2026 Green Tech Conference being held in just a few weeks, June 9th to June 11th at Quebec City Convention Center, we thought the timing was ideal to explore policy priorities, green technologies, and innovation related to sustainable maritime transportation. Before we get started with our guest speakers, a few housekeeping notes regarding the user interface for today's session. To ask a question, please use the Ask the Question box below the video player. I'll give you a second to find that. It's called Ask a Question. I want to note that you can type your question at any time during the broadcast. Questions will be gathered in real time and posed at the end of the session during our Q&A segment. To turn on closed captioning, please click the CC button at the bottom right of the player. Please note you can select English or French captioning. You can also click the FR button along the top right to access the French webpage. If you need technical assistance during the event, please click the Help button along the bottom right and a support agent will be able to assist you. With the housekeeping notes out of the way, we can move on to our session. Despite a rapidly evolving trade landscape that has increased concerns about uncertainty and cost pressures, the marine shipping industry is maintaining its prioritization of sustainability. This session will cover recent sector developments, emerging innovations, and current priorities shaping decarbonization, efficiency, and regulatory direction. Our speakers will also discuss infrastructure resilience across marine and port systems, along with key international developments influencing global shipping networks. We have a very distinguished panel of speakers, and I am pleased to advise that joining us today will be David Bolduc, President and CEO of Green Marine, Daniel Olivier, Expert in Residence, Port and Maritime at Centec, and our very own Paul Topping, Senior Director of Regulatory and Environmental Affairs at the Chamber of Marine Commerce. In the interest of bringing our guests on to share their insights and then afford time at the end for questions, I will now formally introduce our first speaker. David Bolduc is Green Marine International's President and CEO, responsible for overseeing both Green Marine and Green Marine Europe's administration, program development, and strategic planning. He leads a team of 10 employees based in Canada, the United States, and France. He was appointed to his role immediately after the establishment of Green Marine International in May of 2024. He previously served as Green Marine's executive director, being chosen to fill that role in 2010 based on his active involvement in the North American program's inception, structuring, and ultimately launch in 2007. I'm very excited to speak with him today, given David's broad exposure to the latest developments in this space. And in the spirit of keeping things fresh, I'm going to engage in a Q&A with David. So with that, David, welcome. David, our first question, yep, perfect. Our first question to you will be this. Over the past 12 to 18 months, there has been significant changes to the economic and geopolitical environment in which our industry operates. From your perspective as a CEO of Green Marine, how has the maritime industry's approach to sustainability evolved recently?
Indeed, Jason, the last 12 months have been quite a ride. We live in an uncertain world. I think everybody will agree with the fact that there's been a shift in priorities. At the government level, right now, the environment is taking a backseat to the economy. And that's not just in the United States. It's also happening in Canada, even though the tone is different. This it removes incentives for the private sector to go above and beyond, which is in the best of times always challenging. In the past few years, there's been more regulation, stricter regulation regarding the environment. So the incentives I'm talking about here, of course, obviously financial incentives. When grants and funding programs disappear, that's certainly slowing down investments in sustainability. But in a more subtle way, the reputational incentive, the tap on the back, where you get recognition for doing more for the purpose of being a good citizen. So it's not quite there as it used to be. But this is not really the main cause. If some companies decide to pause some environmental actions, which is not happening in a large scale. I see it mostly happening for smaller companies, but some of them are impacted by the economy. The most important factor remains the economy. The trade war is taking its toll. We're not even talking about the oil prices right now. So there's a lot of uncertainty around. This has an impact, and when you're a smaller organization, your finances are under pressure. You have to prioritize, and you pause some non-vital investments. So at Green Marine, we can feel that these hard choices had to be made by a few companies this year. I've been around for almost 20 years now, and for a lot of different reasons, every year we see companies deciding not to renew their certifications, only a few, and we always get a lot more new companies joining the certification program. So this was the case every year, except this year. So we can feel that there's something different in the air. But I'm actually really reassured, considering all of this and the environment we're in. What I'm seeing is that the champions are maintaining their commitment, and they are really staying the course. The language is changing a bit. We talk a bit less about decarbonization, more about energy efficiency, a bit less about climate change, and more about resilience. But it's still the same thing, and we're still taking action. I think our industry is used to long economic cycles. We play the long game. So in the vast majority of cases, I tell you, that's what I'm seeing on the ground, that companies are staying the course. And I see it regarding the conference that is coming, and there's really a huge interest. We have almost 400 people showing up to the conference. Wow. So obviously, it's still important for a lot of people.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So that'll lead in nicely, actually, to my next question. Green Marine was created in 2007 by a group of industry leaders in the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence region as a voluntary, collaborative response to environmental challenges. Nearly 20 years later, the operating environment is very different. How is Green Marine adapting to remain relevant and valuable to participants in today's context?
Well, our strategy is to go with the flow and adapt our language as well when and where needed. And we don't lose sight of our mission, which is to advance sustainability in the maritime industry. And recently we completed with our board of directors a new strategic plan, and we adopted a new vision statement, which is to serve the maritime industry as a worldwide leader, charting the course to sustainability. So despite the fact that we are in challenging times, our horizons for the organization, Green Marine, are expanding at the moment. And you may be aware that we made an important governance change 2 years ago. The corporation was called Green Marine Management Corporation, and it's now become Green Marine International. So we've effectively become an international organization with employees in 3 countries, with members in 15 countries. So this current situation really makes me feel sometimes like I have a bipolarity disorder because I'm very. It's very exciting. It's very challenging. So it's the same things happening at the same time. So while we're struggling maybe a bit more than usual with the membership recruitment and retention in Canada and the United States, I can tell you it's going extremely well in Europe. And there are great opportunities at the international level. We undertook pilot projects 2 years ago. We added some companies and ports from countries like Australia, Mexico, the Bahamas. And we're doing it again this year. We're going with a second round of pilot projects with ports and terminal operators in Argentina, Brazil, Peru, Ecuador, and New Zealand.
Wow.
So I can tell you there's an appetite out there for a framework like Green Marine, a voluntary certification tailor-made for our industry, which is transparent, inclusive, but still managed by the industry. And I think what is very attractive also is that it's not just a certification, it's a community. And that's what people are looking for, some place where you can share ideas, where you learn from others as well. So I think we can be proud of what we created here collectively. I say we in the sense of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence marine industry, because it's us collectively that created Green Marine almost 20 years ago, and it's a successful model that is being exported elsewhere in the world. So in the circumstances, we're doing well. We're adapting to the challenging situation. It's probably making us more agile and resilient as an organization. And I guess you know the saying, never waste a good crisis. Challenges bring change, opportunity, sometimes from unexpected places. I'm just thinking of the oil crisis right now. Of course, an oil crisis is super bad. Everybody is suffering, but this could be a real boost for the energy transition. I heard a few weeks ago from the first time electricity generation from solar power past the electricity generation from coal. So,
wow.
Yeah, there are some good that can come out of it.
Perfect. Especially when we're trying to continue to stimulate interest in alternative fuels, biofuels, that kind of thing. You're right, the timing is perfect in that regard. The upcoming Green Tech Conference is always a major gathering for this industry. What can attendees expect from this year's event in Quebec City?
Yes, it's actually in 10 days. We're very excited about this one. We're back in Quebec City after 10 years. And it's always special for us to organize a conference at home because this is where the head office of Green Marine is located. And this is also where Green Marine was launched in 2007. So if you calculate, this is our 19th conference. It's not quite 20 years, but we decided we want to celebrate the origins because we're going to be in Quebec City where it was launched, even though it's not the perfect round number. And it gives us actually a justification or a reason to celebrate 2 years in a row. So we can celebrate again for the 20th. So we certainly want to highlight during the conference the progress that was made during those almost 2 decades. What started as a modest regional initiative is slowly in the process of becoming an international model in environmental stewardship. And I must say the local community, the maritime community in Quebec City is extremely supportive. We have tours organized by the Port of Quebec, Ocean, STQ, Glencore, the Maritime Simulation Center, and 2 walking tours. So we never had so many before. For the conference itself, the format is pretty similar to what we had in previous years with plenary sessions and breakouts, more landside topics and more shipowner topics. We do have more panel sessions this year. This was a kind of request when we got from the survey, when we surveyed our delegates. We still have the commercial exhibition, which is sold out with more than 30 booths and with very innovative technologies that probably you have never seen before. We also have scientific poster. We have a partnership with RQM, Réseau Québec Maritime. So this is new also this year. But the highlight of the conference is always the certification reception. This year it will be at the very end of the conference where we hand out the certificates. It will be at the cruise terminal where Green Marine was launched. So for the first time also, we are offering anybody who wants to register the opportunity to register only for that, because we realize it's not everybody who can, invest 3 days and $1,000 in a conference. So you have the option to actually go there for $85, and it also gives access to the last plenary session. So this is something new this year that we didn't offer before, and there's not much time left, obviously. So it's still possible to register to the conference until Monday.
Perfect. I'll take this opportunity to say that the Chamber of Marine Commerce is an extremely proud sponsor and consistent sponsor of Green Tech, and we look forward to the event. Our speaker later in this event, Paul Topping, will be making an address there, and that's something you don't want to miss. So this year's program covers a wide range of environmental and operational topics affecting the maritime industry. Are there particular themes, discussions, or sessions that you're especially excited about, either because they reflect emerging challenges or because they showcase promising solutions and collaboration?
Yeah. As a conference organizer, I should say that everything will be fantastic and great. But yes, there are a few things worth mentioning that will be maybe a bit different or to highlight. The opening session, it will be called Deep Roots Expanding Horizon, and celebrating these almost 20 years of history. We're inviting 3 keynote speakers to represent maybe the 3 phases in our history. So Louis-Marie Beaulieu from the Gagné will talk about the beginning, the foundation. He was there when Green Marine was launched. Stephanie Jones-Stebbins from the Port of Seattle will talk about the expansion to the United States. And Laurent Martin, the executive director of the French Shipowners Association, will talk about the creation of Green Marine Europe and the transition to an international organization. Other themes that will be highlighted during the conference will be transatlantic collaboration. We have a large group of European delegates and speakers that will be there, so that will be a great opportunity to hear about what's happening on the other side of the ocean. AI and detection technologies, this one is very timely. It's a big thing right now, and Daniel Olivier, who is speaking today will moderate that very innovative session. Decarbonization, the energy transition, of course, we've been talking about it for years, and we'll be talking about it for years again. It's so important. It has to be a main theme of the conference. Maybe something a bit different and new at the end of the conference, we have panel sessions, and this is the one that if you register just to the certification ceremony that you have access to. We'll have a panel on the ESG as a value driver with speakers from La Caisse de Dépôt and the BMO. So that's super interesting on the financial aspect related to ESG. And then it will be followed by the leadership roundtable with 4 CEOs from different regions and sectors, and they will discuss, how to make the most of a challenging situation. So the title of that roundtable is actually Staying the Course While Facing Headwinds. So I think it says everything. So yeah, I think it's very promising. Anybody who register won't regret it, for sure.
Perfect. I will say for the last question in our back and forth, thought leadership is challenging. Keeping people organized and motivated towards a common concept can be challenging. So leading an organization like Green Marine in today's environment comes with increasing complexity and pressure, obviously, but also opportunities to drive meaningful progress. After another demanding year, what continues to motivate and inspire you personally in your role as CEO, particularly given how stretched you must be operating internationally in different environments?
Yeah, well, that's what drives me, actually, because in a sense, I've been there for more than 20 years because I've been working on the Green Marine program before the launch, so maybe since like 2005 or even four. And I was asked recently by a colleague, are you not tired of always doing the same thing? Being 20 years at the same organization, and Green Marine is also a cycle. Every year you do the certification and the annual conference. But I feel my job right now has nothing to do with what it was 10 years ago. And you said it yourself with everything that is going on. But I think that's what makes it interesting. I started 20 years ago by writing down myself the first version of the program. Now I manage a team of super talented professionals taking care of all the different aspects. And I'm learning to scale up an organization and taking it to the international level. So that's very, very motivating. So what motivates me, it's the diversity, progression in my job, and also the feeling that I'm having an impact, that we're having an impact, Green Marine. It's not spectacular, like inventing a new source of energy, but slowly, gradually over the years, we're contributing to changing the mentality and small actions, step by step, for an entire industry. And I think we're seeing results. So, and I feel also that my colleagues in the team, they share that feeling that we're having an impact. And I guess that's why we have a pretty good retention rate at Green Marine.
Yeah, they do. It definitely. Everyone that I've interacted with, David, from Green Marines is the same as you, whether it's Manon, Ray Johnston, who's had a long connection with CMC, a long connection with Green Marine. Your team shares your passion and excitement. And I think that that's one of the key drivers for why Green Marine has had such an extraordinary growth over the past two decades or so, and continues to see the enthusiasm and success that it has. So thank you for your insightful comments. We're going to come back to you towards the end when we go to our Q&A. We appreciate all the context setting that you've done for us today. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Having heard from David about the overall approach to sustainability and Green Marine's leadership in that space, we'll now turn the proceedings over to an expert who can speak to how many companies are being supported in the process of moving sustainability ideas from concept to commercialization. Daniel Olivier is a maritime innovation strategist, and his assignments over the years have exposed him to a broad range of exciting maritime and supply chain issues. He attained his PhD from the University of Hong Kong in economic geography, specifically in port investment, and he deepened his supply chain management knowledge at Georgia Tech University. He currently works with Centec, a nonprofit organization that assists high-tech companies and projects with high growth potential, from conceptualization to commercialization, by supporting a bold, collaborative, and passionate ecosystem. To tell us more about Centec's work in the marine space, I will now turn the proceedings over to Daniel. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Jason. Very pleased to be with you all today. I'm also very excited to have the opportunity to talk about a brand new initiative that really well aligns with the theme of today's sustainability and resilience. So what I'd like to talk about today is called St. Lawrence Lab. It's brand new, and in a nutshell, what it aims to do is it's a collective of ports and maritime stakeholders that wish to innovate together collectively. So the concept in itself is rather disruptive, but what we're aiming to do here is creating a structure that will accelerate innovation in our sector by fast-tracking entry of tech startups in the port and maritime space. And how we do this is by matching tech startups with ports in a living lab sort of concept, where ports along the St. Lawrence corridor are opening up their facilities for tech startups to come in and test their technologies. And for the first year of this initiative, our innovation challenge, the theme is resilience of port infrastructure. So that's really superbly aligned with today's theme. Jason, maybe if we can turn to the slides. I don't see them on my screen.
Okay, Kurt's slide is about Centec.
Okay, perfect. Great. Let's start there. Okay, so maybe a few words about Centec. Some of you may be less familiar with that. So we're based in Montreal. We're an innovation hub, one of the largest in Canada and actually one of the top 10 in the world. The mission is to support tech startups through a variety of support programs, from ideation, early stage, to all the way to commercial solution maturity. We're celebrating 30 years this year, launched in 1996 as a nonprofit. We're affiliated to one of Quebec's largest engineering university. And we also have programs that also accompany large corporations in deploying innovation and working with startups. About 140 startups a year that we support. Next slide, please. Okay, great. Now I can see the slides. Thank you. The context where it all began, this is nothing new for most of industry members here today. There's competitiveness issues around the St. Lawrence corridor, competitiveness issues around infrastructure deficit. According to ACPA, the St. Lawrence corridor accounts for half of the infrastructure deficit for all Canadian federal ports. There's stagnant or low growth in terms of traffic compared to the rest of the world in maritime industry. Some ports have lost market share in the US recently. Unstable industrial relations, and the list goes on. I think I'm not teaching anything new here. But what's worrying is it's not only restricted to the St. Lawrence corridor, but all of Canada's maritime industry, is that there's a slow adoption rate of innovation and tech in our sector. As a matter of fact, according to a recent Quebec Tech study, sectors like banking, insurance, medical are able to attract 4 to 5 times more risk capital and new ventures and new startups than the transportation sector. And I think that's quite alarming if we're looking at it from an innovation and productivity point of view. So we see transportation as being a laggard, and we wish to correct that. Meanwhile, leading the most innovative ports in the world are actually working alongside with startups in a model we call open innovation. Open innovation simply means you're co-creating a solution that doesn't necessarily exist in the market with young tech companies. So that's really innovation. Ports are doing it now, either internally on their own, like Rotterdam, like Barcelona, or even Halifax. Or they can also partner with local accelerators and incubators, like, for example, Antwerp, Los Angeles, Singapore. It works with a university, and Quebec also. The Port of Quebec has an ecosystem of accelerators. We're also seeing this more recently among carriers, ocean carriers like Maersk. They have a program called Ocean Pro. They have startup recruitment programs, CMA CGM's box. Even bulk carriers are actually having startup recruitment programs. I'm thinking Eastern Pacific Shipping Lines out of Singapore work with Techstars. So this is also a new way of looking at innovation into our sector. And we wish to advance this further, basically through the St. Lawrence Lab. What we're seeing is there's a rapprochement between the 5 federal ports in Quebec. There's a willingness to collaborate on several issues. So what we did is we created a structure where ports can innovate together collectively and de-risk innovation. So next slide, please. So that's what is St. Lawrence Lab, really. I deal with a lot of startups on a daily basis. And when you ask them, what is your perception of ports and maritime? Well, they'll tell you it's a highly regulated industry. It's complicated from a procurement standpoint. It's full of red tape. I don't know how a port works. The governance is complicated. Federal, provincial, municipal, private, terminal operators, port authorities. I don't get it. So the idea of St. Lawrence Lab is to create a structure that will fast-track entry of startups into our industry. So that's really the objective. And so to create a joint innovation program through a collaborative approach, innovating on common and shared themes is really what it is. All the innovation that will be done under St. Lawrence Lab will be under 4 strategic pillars. First is cargo fluidity. Second is smart corridor. Third is decarbonization and clean energy. and fourth, resilient infrastructure and supply chains. So that's why I'm glad to be here today on that topic. We also wish to democratize innovation. What do I mean by that? Is to lower the barrier of entry for smaller ports that wish to innovate but don't necessarily have innovation teams, don't necessarily have research funds. So basically, by pooling money, resources, learnings, sharing learnings, that really accelerates innovation at an industry sector level. Finally, the hidden agenda also is to actually build a community of entrepreneurs in the maritime sector that actually reflects the contribution that transport, logistics, and maritime are contributing to the Canadian GDP. So there's a disproportion there where we're not seeing enough of these companies coming into our sector. So the partners on the left that you see on this slide are actually behind the St. Lawrence Lab. It's centrally coordinated by Centec with the help of 2 Degrés, an incubator in clean technologies based out of Quebec. The Port of Quebec is also our industrial champion. There's the Center for Logistics Research Expertise based in Trois-Rivières. We also have technical expertise from Rimouski through Innovation Maritime. And we're also supported by an Halifax-based accelerator in blue economy called Ocean Startup Project. So the partners that are behind this collectively represent the entire St. Lawrence corridor ecosystem. Next slide, please. The St. Lawrence port system actually represents 160 million tons. If you close your eyes for a second, it would be the fourth largest port in North America, the corridor taken as a whole. Even bigger than Vancouver, bigger than New York. So when you approach a startup and say, we're giving you access to the entire corridor, that's different than telling them you have access to one port. 160 million tons is a critical mass. So those are the industry members that we, in year one, have agreed to launch with us. They all have in common one thing, is they're members of the Port Logistics Expertise Center. Originally, the St. Lawrence Lab was thought as emerged as an innovation program that would complement applied research for those ports who would be interested. So in the collective of ports that you see there, we have the St. Lawrence Seaway, we have federal port authorities, we have municipal, provincial, we also have 3 private terminal operators, and recently we've added Transport Canada and Green Marine, obviously through some of the teams that are also aligned with them. That's a critical mass that, so those are the adopters of the solutions that will be developed under St. Lawrence Lab. Next slide, please. So at the core and the heart of this initiative is an innovation challenge that's going to be on a yearly cycle. This year, we collectively consulted the industry, and resilience port infrastructure was the theme that we are launching on. So back in March, we opened a call to startups. We called upon all Canadian startups with a sufficient maturity level to present solutions in the 3 sub-themes that you see here. First is the infrastructure inspection, anything related to punctual, recurring inspection of critical infrastructure, key walls, breakwaters, whatever is related, even bridges, roads, railways, anything related to a port, measuring the rate of deterioration and decay of critical infrastructure. The other sub-theme was asset monitoring, bringing in a real-time sort of data monitoring capacity through IoT, different sensors on the ground, building databases and decision support tools out of that, critical assets, electricity grid, sewage system, gate security assets, you name it. The third sub-theme was related to climate resilience. Anything related to weather, predicting freak weather incidents, ice, snow. It's a big issue on the St. Lawrence River, as you all know. So we called upon Canadian startups to come in and present potential solutions that could be of interest to ports. We received, very happy to say, we received 32 submissions. We narrowed it down to 9 in front of an industry jury. And now we have selected 5 finalists with a view of deploying pilot tests in the summer. Next slide, please. So the finalists were just announced earlier this week. Very happy to announce Balco, SmartTrek, Cone Labs, Aquadrone, and Amotus. They're coming from different provinces across Canada. All have very interesting solutions. The next step is to present these finalist startups and match them with ports based on the needs. So that's the next step is to actually launch projects over the course of this summer. The idea of doing this collectively will de-risk innovation. So we have a principle of transferability where a solution can be tested in one port, but can be adopted by many others. So if it's good in Sept-Îles, it should be good in Quebec, should be good in Montreal, Bécomo, so that ports can actually join together to share the budget, share the cost of a project, share the risk, and then eventually adopt that solution. So we're innovating on themes that are common and shared. It's not about innovation that's strategic and proper to a port. It's really about shared and common themes. So the goal is to have solutions deployed in production eventually. So after this, next slide. Very good. So we've done this is done in 3 different blocks. We're just wrapping up the selection process as we speak. We announced the finalists. We're in the process of introducing them to the different industry members and adopters with the view of identifying use cases and developing pilot projects in those ports. This should be launched during this summer. We have a 6-month cycle for project completion. So in spring of next year, we'll regather the entire industry members and share learnings about these solutions. So the shared learning will accelerate the innovation learning process, and hopefully will give some concrete results. So we will have projects, and these projects are on the pilot level, but eventually, if they're conclusive and of interest, then ports can contract with the startups to actually go into full deployment mode thereafter. We're doing this on an annual cycle, so next year it'll be a different theme along these 4 strategic pillars that I mentioned. One last thing I want to mention is that we're in year 1. It's kind of an experimental concept. It's never been done before. So we're using a lean model. The membership is the one we started, but it's going to grow. We wish to grow and broaden our membership. We're also going to evaluate success, the take-up rate, the projects. We have KPIs for success measurement, and we also obviously wish to grow the membership. So Jason, that's all I had for today in terms of my intervention. We'll be super glad to take questions. If any of the CMC members are interested in joining this experimental journey, we would definitely love to hear from you. So thank you.
And thank you, Daniel, for your comprehensive presentation about this innovative concept. And I will take this opportunity, since you had raised it, to remind everybody that there's still opportunity for you to write in your questions for our speakers today. And I encourage you to get your questions in as early as possible. Characteristic of this event, we usually end up with a lot more questions than we're able to answer. So the earlier you write yours in, the better. Again, you would use the Ask a Question button that you will see at the bottom of your screen. Our third and final speaker today is my colleague, Paul Topping, Senior Director, Regulatory and Environmental Affairs for the Chamber of Marine Commerce, who joins us today from Hamburg, Germany. As Senior Director, Regulatory and Environmental Affairs, Paul works with Canadian domestic ship owners on various issues from reducing air emissions to protecting waters and other regulatory matters. Prior to joining the Chamber in 2017, he worked for 28 years in marine-related positions in the Canadian government, managing regulatory programs at both Environment Canada and Transport Canada. He has extensive experience representing Canada at international meetings, notably at the International Maritime Organization, or IMO's, Marine Environment Protection Committee since 1999. And it is exactly that kind of work that has him joining us from Europe today. Paul, I'm very keen to get an overview from you about the work you do and the recent developments related to the IMO and efforts to advance environmental protection globally. So I'll turn the proceedings over to you now. Paul.
Thank you very much, Jason, and greetings from Hamburg, Germany, where for the last 2 days, members of the International Chamber of Shipping, or ICS, gathered to ponder the next steps in the GHG negotiations at the International Maritime Organization. As the Chamber of Marine Commerce is a member of the ICS, I attend meetings of ICS and have been an observer on Canada's delegation at IMO for 8 years, and before that, a Canadian delegate for some 25 years. The picture that you see in the slide is that of the IMO's Marine Environment Protection Committee in session. This is the committee overseeing the GHG negotiations. It brings representatives anywhere from 80 to 100 countries of IMO's 175 member states, along with representatives from some 80 international associations, including the ICS, and non-government organizations. As most of you may know, in April last year, IMO agreed on a net zero framework that was to set out a GHG fuel indicator, a technical element, along with a fee system and an IMO fund, an economic element. This basically got blown out of the water by the United States and Saudi Arabia and other petrostates at an extraordinary meeting in October that was expected to actually adopt the framework. The framework was developed under Annex 6 to the Marpol Convention, which sets rules to prevent air pollution from ships. This convention has rules for how its annexes can be amended, and namely that it needs the approval of at least 5 parties, countries, but parties to the convention, whose combined ship registries amount to at least 50% of the tonnage of the world's ships. Major flag states who have the largest registries can make a difference between a new rule coming into force and passing or not. What the US has done is they have forced 4 major flag states to vote their way. So long as the tonnage with these 4 flag states and the other like-minded parties, such as Russia, this bloc controls 50% of the world tonnage. So the US can virtually block anything it does not like. Also in October, they suspended the extraordinary meeting for a year. It technically hasn't resolved itself yet. The latest meeting of the committee at the end of April saw countries repeat their positions, but given the US hammer over them, they agreed to 2 meetings of the IMO GHG Working Group, September 1 to 4, and in November 23rd to 27th, just before the next meeting of the committee, November 30th to December 4th. The last day of the committee's meeting is to be set aside to conclude the extraordinary meeting if the voting parties to Annex 6 so agree to it. So leading into September, governments may make some proposals. But the move by the US and its allies have upset Europe and developing countries, notably Pacific Island states, which saw the IMO fund as the first real work to meet climate finance goals under wider initiatives, which so far these climate finance regimes have, over the last 20 years, pulled together contributions approaching $100 billion. IMO's fund was estimated by some, along with the revenue expected, to generate that amount every year. Others saw that it would be a smaller amount, about 10 billion. However, right now, that revenue is 0. So what now? As someone who's been close to the discussions, I see possibilities. The US have set conditions. They're not necessarily going to scrap everything. But they have set conditions of what they don't want to see. Main thing is it has to focus on the technical framework, and they don't want to see a economic element, a move. The other element is on the technical framework. This sets a series of annual targets on a reduction trajectory, and the current trajectory is set fairly steeply in the opening years to create revenue, as the fuel and technology are simply not in place to replace the over 300 million tons of fuel global shipping needs. So that trajectory needs to be adjusted to reflect fuel availability at the start, and with a steeper curve towards the 2050 period, which is the agreed timeframe to land on a net zero goal. IMO life cycle standards will also need to include LNG and sustainable biofuels. And of note, Europe's Fuel EU program is seeing a 92% compliance rate, but this is primarily from ships using LNG and trading surplus units from that. As such, the new IMO framework will need to retain the surplus units. This is one element where a ship that reduces more emissions than is required by that year's target. This would avoid stranding early adopters that have already invested billions of dollars in improvements. But there will be no fund. And that is why we need those sustainable units. And many details still need to be worked out. This is basically an early stage of trying to figure out what's going on. I don't see IMO coming to a new agreement in December, but the organization will continue to work through 2027, where a new framework could emerge. I'll be giving a talk at this at Green Tech in 2 weeks, and for now, I will stop here for questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate this. And so as Paul had mentioned, we'll go into our Q&A section now. We'll begin fielding questions from our audience. And the first one, actually, I'm going to piggyback on with my personal experience. So I'm going to pose that to David. So we'll bring David on screen there. So David, the question that I have for you, and my personal take, having come from the seafood industry, we have something called the marine stewardship certification. So that there's a certain amount of static credentials you have to meet to keep your sustainability bona fides. But what I like about Green Marine is that it invites people in by asking them to establish a bar for themselves to hit, and then challenges them to keep expanding the bar. So can you talk to us a little bit about that conception and how that keeps things fresh, keeps it accessible for people to want to come in, start the program, and then challenge themselves to do better?
Well, the main principle is that the certification is owned by the members. I always say it was created by the industry for the industry. So we're not like an independent third party relying on experts that are not sailing or doing port operations. On the contrary, we have those people around the table. So it ensures that the program remains relevant. And it needs to be constantly adapted because, as you know, it's supposed to be above and beyond regulation. It's a program about doing more. So regulation changes. So we need to adapt this program. And moving the needle to the right balance is the constant challenge. Because as a voluntary industry initiative, we need to have, if we want to have credibility, this needs to be recognized by the stakeholders, like environmental groups, government. So they participate in these discussions. So the program needs to be ambitious enough to maintain their interest and participation. But if it becomes too ambitious, too demanding, and at some point we lose companies and industry players. So it's always finding the right balance, but it's a constant process of dialogue. So that's what actually the Green Marine model is about.
Perfect. Yeah, no, thanks for that. That's a great summary and a great précis of how the approach, I think, has been tremendously successful. My next question is for Daniel. Is the initiative you discussed restricted to ports, or do you intend to broaden membership to include other members?
Yeah, thanks, Jason, for asking that. The answer is yes, we do have an intention to broaden to maritime stakeholders. Some of the solutions you saw on the slides maybe have caught your attention. So we have a startup, for example, that looks at degradation of steel structures and can use AI to basically predict the decay, the deterioration. So you can immediately imagine that this would be super applicable to hull of a ship, a crane, a tugboat, a shipbuilding yard, whatever. So I think everything that deals with ports logistics, their users, their customers, railways, trucking, obviously ocean carriers is the end goal. We thought we would start with the core membership of ports to begin with, and then eventually extend that year 2 and year 3 to broaden the membership. But maritime stakeholders that deal with ports, especially ocean carriers, are definitely welcome to join the initiative.
Perfect. And I'm just noticing a question here. Can you recap for us, how are projects funded under the St. Lawrence Lab?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jason. So if you look at competing or existing innovation programs that are sort of geared at big corporations, I'm thinking Plug and Play, for example. This is a brand you may know. Normally, what they'll do is they'll charge humongous, membership fees. Our financial model, business model is completely different. The joining or membership fee is very small. It's more symbolic, but what we ask for members who join is to be ready to fund projects. So basically, when you say proof of concept, normally typically it's a small, low budget kind of a project where you're going on a fast cycle, where you want to deploy a solution quickly, test it in a real world environment under a smaller budget. If it works, if it's conclusive, then you can go and scale up into production. So a proof of concept or a pilot project normally typically will be funded by industry members themselves. Now, there are different ways of lowering these costs. First is ports are encouraged to actually join together to test these solutions. So you could test an inspection of a quay wall in Sept-Îles. The same startup can test the pillars or breakwaters in a different port in a different setting. So startups, once you open up the facilities to startups, they can hop on and test their solutions across different ports. So that would lower the cost. The vision of the St. Lawrence Lab in year 2, and we're really working hard on that, is to also build a proof of concept fund, where the financial model will, if you join the initiative, there will be a small fund available to fund these projects and help industry members to kickstart the project, so to lower their cost. But for now, it's the industry members that are expected to pay for these projects.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Our last question will go to Paul Topping, and this must be someone who knows him. So, Paul, you've been going to these meetings since '99. Is this the most dynamic time you've seen in the international space for the competing prerogatives of various nations, or is this sort of business as usual?
No, it's anything but business as usual. It is the most dynamic that we've seen. The events of October were unprecedented, and it was been a very difficult time. The meeting we had it concluded in April this year was much more cordial. The Americans have set their conditions, and they have their reasons. So they have set their conditions, and they have pulled back to say, you guys go ahead and talk amongst yourselves, but these are the conditions. And I think this is the approach so far that they've been taking, and ICS is cognizant of that, and it's also looking at things from a ship owner perspective. One of the things ICS brings to these particular these discussions, which is different from other IMO, is the government delegates are typically climate policy specialists, normally working in the UNFCCC space. And they're not old IMO hands, if you like. So that makes it another bit of challenging in order to land on something that is workable for the shipping sector. So it is an extremely challenging approach. And they are wider geopolitics that creep into things. And it's been a progression for several decades. notably with the G77. And the name of the 77 developing countries, that gives you the number of the votes that they can bring. And they bring ambassadors to do that. So they've generally not been able to coordinate that and take advantage of their numbers, but under the climate change issue, they have. And that is probably one of the biggest difference we see compared to other discussions at IMO. I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thank you for that comprehensive answer. And given that we only have a few minutes left, I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone again, all of our panel members, for a great session and for great insights that they shared today. Please remember, everyone that's viewing this session, you can download this presentation by clicking the icon, and the event stays live to you through the registration link for the next 30 days. As I mentioned at the outset of this event, our virtual events are happening quarterly, so you can look forward to our next session in the fall after the summer break. Expect promotional material coming your way in September, but feel free to connect with Maggie and I about our plans if you're interested in knowing what's coming next. And I do want to take this opportunity again, as I did last time, to thank Maggie Murphy, our communications and membership specialist, for all the work she does behind the scenes to make these events go so smoothly, from the preparation of materials to the outreach to members, to the materials on the day and the support to our speakers. She does a magnificent job. So do look forward to our next session coming up. Have a great summer, and thank you for joining us, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.